it's been almost 2 years since the mass shooting at Oxford High School, and still there's so much sadness and sorrow still, but there also is this search for answers. So an independent investigation has finally been released. Charlie Langton here to break it all down. Charlie, thanks for being here as always.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a 572-page report that I read every single. I read a lot of it, I have to admit. It's interesting reading, but it's very detailed reading. So it's not a nice read. It's a difficult read.
Who ordered the report to be done, and when?
The Oxford High School Board of Education, they basically said about a year and a half ago or so, we want to get a report from an independent organization that conducts work for governments, risk assessments. And there's people here, they do security and technology consultants, they work for government agencies, they've got members from the FBI, lawyers, counselors on their team, CIA, public health and safety experts. Okay, so that's the team. It's an out-of-state, they consult. It's called Guidepost Solutions. And just the other day, they came out with the report. Now, today, at 1 o'clock, 3:30, and 6:30 in Oxford, there will be a public meeting. So the public can come and ask the authors of this report any question they want. Interestingly, up there, not letting the media ask any questions. But be that as it may, I'm assuming they're going to let us be there, and I hope to go up there today. But the bottom line, the big conclusion of the report was that the tragic shooting at Oxford was avoidable. And kind of the big takeaways, they have threat assessments that they really can quantify what you're supposed to look for, and they grade the difference. You know, the shooter wrote down things and he communicated things. Bottom line, threat assessment protocol was not followed. Principal of the school was not even notified that there could be a problem. And then there were a number of other things. As the shooter starts shooting, although they have a lot of cameras around, it wasn't monitored properly. Now, there are a lot of other takeaways, but those are kind of the big ones. And not everybody cooperated with the report. There were 70 people that this group wanted to interview, teachers, personnel, etc., and they, for whatever reason, said no. Some hint that the lawyer for the school district said don't talk. Others say, the principal said, or the school board said don't talk, whatever.
Why would the lawyer say not talk, Charlie?
Well, the lawyer said, if you represent, you're being sued by a lot of people, and they don't want
to incriminate yourself,
and they don't want to incriminate themselves. So I can understand the policy. Interesting, on the lawsuit side, there have been a number of them. They've all been thrown out of court on the issue of they call governmental immunity, meaning you can't sue the government, the school being part of the government.
In other words, families trying to sue the district or sue the school or certain people at the school, it doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little more elaborate than that, but the bottom line to the whole thing is you can't sue the school. Now, that is on appeal, and attorneys like Ben Johnson and others want the legislature to change the definition of governmental immunity to allow, in certain circumstances, victims to sue the school. But that's not going to happen. It's not happening now, and these lawsuits are on appeal. But they're
Charlie,
not there
just
yet.
to remind people, and we don't want to relive this day at all, but I was up there covering the shootings, and there was this amazing sense of such frustration in addition to all the sadness, because a teacher did highlight that this person was drawing these graphic, violent pictures. I don't know the legal terms, but she plucked him out of the classroom, sent him to the office with the backpack, which we now know had the gun in it, right?
Yes.
And he's sitting there, parents are called in, and at that moment, that could have changed life for so many people if the right thing would have been done at that moment.
So they call that a threat assessment, and so you grade them. If I just draw a picture, that may be a 1. But if I couple that with words, I'm going to kill or help me, that will get it to a 2. And if there's my body language, that could elevate it to a 3. And then there's certain things you do. And again, there's a lot more to it, I recognize that. But it's that you do an assessment, and then depending on how high this guy scores, he's got a past history, the shooter exhibited problems in the past. So yeah, the threat assessment was just not followed. And so I think that's the big takeaway, and all the specifics you mentioned, and we've seen a lot of them, the drawings and the words and the diary and that type of thing.
Shooter, who we're not naming his name, is sent back into the school. Parents are sent home.
Yeah.
And that's
this does feel so avoidable, and the report concludes that this was avoidable. My broader question is, how can other schools, how can other school districts use this report and kind of shore up their own policies and procedures to ensure this doesn't happen at their school, because this was avoidable. This was, among anything, human error.
A great question. The same group actually did another report. It came out in May, and I think we talked about it, but the focus of that report was going forward. Did Oxford High School change its policy? And they did, according to the other report. And your question about other schools, they should take a look at this report. They should figure out what is an assessment, what is an analysis, what is all these different things that we've talked about, and change the policy. And many schools have.
Can the Michigan Department of Education do anything with this, like to ensure everybody looks at this?
Yeah, I think they can, and I think they have. A lot of school districts that I'm aware of, they have changed their policies, including Oxford. So
somebody watching wants to read this. Could they find it somewhere?
On our website, Fox 2 Detroit. It's right out there.
Good.
Yeah.
Good,
I mean, there's an executive summary, and then they break it down. So I mean, it's a sad reading, but it is an interesting reading.
And I do want to say this. We should also point out a lot of people did the right thing that day in protecting students and trying to save lives.
Sure, they did.
So there were mistakes made, but some other people worked really hard to make sure there weren't more victims.
Yeah, very sad situation.
All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back. All right, welcome back, everybody. There is a ballot battle headed to the courtroom involving former President Donald Trump. It's the effort by some to keep him off of Michigan's ballot going to court, assuming, right, that he makes it that far in this presidential run.
Oh, he should be on the primary, though. This is the primary and the election.
Yeah, this will be for the primary. We start with the primary. The issue is whether or not Donald Trump should be on the Michigan primary, either February or March. That's debatable, too. But let's just say whenever they announce that date, there is some discrepancy there. The issue, though, is some argue that Donald Trump is ineligible to run for president because he instigated something called an insurrection. And that violates the Constitution, specifically the 14th Amendment, and more specifically, Little Clause 3, which basically says that you are not eligible to run for an elective office like president if you have participated in an insurrection, which is the violent
uprising against an authority or government.
How do you prove that? I mean, that's not something you can be convicted of. How do you prove that?
They look to January 6th and what happened on that day of all of the rioting at the Capitol, the breaking. So here's the legal issue. There's actually two cases in Michigan. There's three, but let's go with two. First of all, some guy named Robert Davis, who is a community activist. He's filed a lot. He's a very smart guy, and he filed a lot of cases. He filed one. He believes, and he says that the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has the authority to determine that Donald Trump did have an insurrection and he's ineligible. The second lawsuit is by Mark Brewer, a Democratic activist. Don't laugh. His argument is basically that he wants a judge to decide the insurrection issue. Okay? That's the issue. All right?
The way you say insurrection is tickling my funny bone for some reason.
I know, it's kind of...
Okay, so...
But he's not convicted of anything. Just simply participating in an insurrection can make you disqualified to be on a ballot.
I don't know. That's the issue.
I know.
What does Jocelyn Benson say?
Jocelyn Benson, who's a Democrat, probably would never vote for Trump ever, says she does not have the authority and essentially Trump should be on the ballot. That's what she says. She's a Democrat. And this case in Michigan, which is going to start next week here, there's going to be some hearings on it.
There's other cases going on currently.
There's a current case going on in Colorado. They're on, I think, day 3, and then there's going to start one in Minnesota. So we have Colorado and Minnesota. By the way, Trump lost those states, so he probably doesn't care. But the Michigan one is kind of a swing.
Yeah,
it's a little more important.
Trump
people
campaign.
say so. People are going to be looking to this. But the issue is, who does decide whether or not Trump had, should be disqualified from the ballot? Should it be the Secretary of State, or should it be a judge? And it may be academic. And Trump said, of course, he didn't do anything. And by the way, Trump filed a lawsuit just this week against Secretary of State Benson to make sure that Trump can get on. So we're actually dealing with 3 lawsuits. And Donald Trump, I think, will come to Michigan to attend at least one of these lawsuits here in Michigan.
Wow.
So the issue, it's clear in the Constitution, if you participate, for the people who've been convicted of participating in the insurrection on January 6th, they can't run for president.
I don't know. I think that's the issue.
I thought that was in the Constitution.
no person shall be
The United
president.
States Constitution?
The United States Constitution, that's right. But again, I think you have to define
I mean,
what
is that
is
what we...
your...
Participation in insurrection. Yeah.
Right, that's it.
What words are we struggling to define here?
One of them is insurrection. What does it mean? And it says, so if you participate in, we should get the actual, put it on there. But you should. What does that mean, participation? I think that's a little bit vague. And
Right,
I think
but the guy who sat on Nancy Pelosi's desk.
probably he can't run. That's probably it. He probably cannot
Was it a
run.
riot or an insurrection?
Well.
I thought it was an
rebellion.
insurrection.
It actually goes on to say
There you go, rebellion. That's
well,
the thing.
it says
How do you
insurrection or
define it?
rebellion.
How do you define it?
And then who's got the authority to do
Right.
that? I mean, you should have a hearing.
Why
Now,
would it not be an insurrection, though?
Well, it can be a rebellion.
Well, so Donald Trump says he was doing a peaceful protest to protest the process of them certifying Biden. Is that an insurrection? I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, that's the issue. We can have peaceful protests
The
all
only
day
way
long.
to be it's an insurrection if they go, we're going to have an insurrection, let's go. And then it's clearly, other than that, you can legally wiggle your way through a bunch
I
of
think
stuff.
there's a lot of subjectivity. I mean, the general rule is that anybody who wants to run can run, unless you're a felon. There's some real rules. But on this stuff, I think it's never been defined before, ever.
Wow. We talk about democracy a lot.
This is democracy. And,
Let the
listen, we
people decide.
protest. People protest. I'm not taking any position. If a court decides, fine.
Yep.
Secretary of State, she's out of it. She's not going to decide it.
Very interesting, man.
Well,
This
she
is
said
very
he should be on the ballot. And by the way, all of this stuff just fuels his fire, right?
Politically, I think it
Yeah.
does.
It does.
I think it does, for sure.
What's tonight on Let It Rip, Charlie?
We are going to talk about Oxford tonight and what this report means. We're going to talk to some victims. We'll be here, and there'll be a number of people, some attorneys, and we'll talk about Oxford and where we go from here, and should the law change, and how do we get over this Oxford situation? We still have a couple trials coming up, too, parents, etc. A lot to talk about with Oxford.
All right, Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Good job.